My third and final entitled people story is another BMW story. This time it involves a rather popular bar in a major northern UK city. This involved a male Karen, henceforth known as Kevin. It was early in the day and the bar wasn't open until 7 p.m. that evening. I arrived at the bar, my task for the day being to await a scaffold being delivered and erected, and then use the said scaffold to remove some old CCTV cameras and upgrade them to much better ones. I have a full set of keys for the bar, and the bar has its own private car park, which is protected by locking drop-down bollards. They're not automatic or anything fancy like that, so I have to pull up on the street outside, lock my van up, walk over, and drop the bollards, usually with the mandatory soaking, as the pits they are installed in invariably fill up with rainwater, and then finally I pull my van inside. I usually then raise the bollards to stop others parking in there. The place in question is extremely close to the Social Security Benefits Office, and the bollards were indeed installed because their clientele were constantly using it rather than pay to park like the rest of the population. So this morning I pulled in, got out of my van, and dropped the bollards so I could park in the car park. The scaffold truck with the team on was about 20 minutes behind me, so I had time to go in and have a quick walk to the coffee shop just around the corner. Unfortunately, just after I dropped the bollards, Kevin drove up in his BMW X5, pulled into the car park, and parked. I followed him in and also parked. I tapped on his window and told him it was a private car park and he needed to leave. He was on a hands-free call and he simply gestured me away. So I tapped again and he wound down his window and shouted, "I'm on a freaking phone call," wound his window up and began ignoring me. Although I could have been really malicious and locked him in, I didn't. I simply walked around the corner and got my coffee, leaving the bollards down so he could leave if he wanted. About 5 minutes later I came back, coffee in hand. He was still there, still on the phone, and I could see the scaffold lorry at the bottom of the hill making its way up. Again I tapped on his window and he mouthed, "Get lost," at me. The lorry arrived. I gestured to them to reverse into the small car park, which they did. It blocked up the whole car park. The team of 3 rather big muscular scaffolders jumped out and started unloading and building the scaffold. A fairly big affair made of around 50 bars and over 4 levels up the back of the building. 10 minutes passed and the first levels were starting to appear like a rather fascinating mechano set. I don't know the first thing about this stuff, so I just watched in awe as they flung together bars and planks like monkeys on speed. Kevin finished his important call and then got out of his rather fancy X5 and walked across to the social services building. Now I presume he thought we'd all be done by the time he got out so he could just jump in his car and drive off. Almost an hour passed. The scaffold got taller and wider and the lorry got emptier. But there was still a whole level to go on top yet, and as they got higher the build speed slowed down. I gave them a hand by passing parts up, but I couldn't actually do anything else because I wasn't skilled or qualified. Kevin came back after about an hour and 10 away and said to me, "You have to let me out." I said back, "Mate, you aren't going anywhere I tried to tell you, but you told me to get lost." He started to get aggressive and pushed me, at which point the scaffolders came down and started to back me up. They looked scary. He didn't. He jumped in his X5 and sat there on his phone. 10 minutes later, the police rolled up. Apparently, he'd phoned them because we were blocking him in and had threatened him. I talked calmly to the police officer and explained what had actually happened, explaining that with it being a bar, the whole incident was on CCTV. I gave them my details and the details and the details of my company, and the scaffolders did the same. Then the second officer started checking our vehicles. I thought this a bit curious, but whatever. So the first officer then asked the scaffolders if they could indeed move and let the guy out, and they obliged, although it took them a couple of minutes to throw some ties over their load. We were all very compliant, although the police did tell us off it is an offense to knowingly obstruct someone or block someone in a car park or parking space, even on private land. Kevin then got in his BMW and reversed out through the gates, at which point the second officer gestured to him to pull the car up on the road and get out of it. So it transpired after a little more questioning that Kevin had neither road tax, insurance, nor did he even have a driving license. The reason the police had to let him get out of the car park was because no crime was being committed until he attempted to drive it. Once he attempted that, he was in contravention of the Road Traffic Act and they could seize his car. Thus, the final piece of this story involves the police sending him walking down to the bus stop, whilst the second officer drove his 2-year-old BMW X5 to the impound yard, where he would have to pay a lot of money to get it back, and could only get it back if someone with a valid license, and could only get it back if someone with a valid license and insurance went to collect it. I found out later that had he paid for a P's 2.70 parking ticket, he would have been over PS 1100 better off that day after the cost of getting the car back, plus the hefty fine he was given for driving without the correct documentation or qualification. This happened 3 years ago, but my friend reminded me of it yesterday, so I thought I'd share. It was the middle of June, and my first weekend off in quite a long time. I'd been giving my friend a never-ending rain check of promising to teach her to fish. Our schedules finally line up. Weather's perfect. It's fishing time. We arrive at a local lake. It's the type where you don't need a fishing license, just a pass for the lake. Money goes to the city. We buy our passes from the concession stand and head back to my car to get the gear. I brought 3 setups, one for me, one for a friend, one just in case. It's a really busy Saturday morning. Lots of people. We do a mini hike across the lake to get to our spot and get to fishing. Friends learn quickly. We catch a few before the sun's all the way up. We're pumped how well the day is going and decide to take a lunch break when it starts to get hot. About 11, we take the stuff back to my car. We chill, eat, hydrate, and head back. While we're walking back, a group of kids break away from their families to follow us around. They were all boys, 4 of them. 3 of them were probably around 8 to 11 years old, and the 4th is maybe 6. I'm thinking they just want to watch us fish, and they likely told their parents where they were going, so I don't even think about it. We get back to our spot, but the kids are trying to follow us down the hill. The top of the hill has a trail. If you're careful, you can climb down to reach a small landing that's close to the water's edge. It was stressing me out to watch these kids try to climb down, so I yelled up to them. A safer place for them to watch basically next to us. Easier to get to, but there's a gap in between the landings. Once they got down, they decided to have a rock skipping contest. Not exactly polite to do that next to people fishing, but I let it go. And these kids decided to have a jumping contest. They're jumping from their landing to our landing back and forth. There's only a 2-foot gap, but if they fell, they'd definitely get hurt. Friends are getting more stressed than me watching them. Makes them promise her to be careful. They said what I probably would have said when I was their age, fine, whatever guys. The ringleader of the group, oldest, maybe 11, then asks me if they're allowed to fish. I ask them if they have a pass. Stupid me, they say yes in unison. I tell them if you get a pass, you're good to go. Ringleader puts his hands on my fishing pole that I'm holding still and asks if he can use it. I pull away, say no bud, I'm using it. He picks up my just-in-case pole without asking and says, what about this one? No, that's mine, and I don't want you hurting yourself with it. Little brat gives me an attitude and shouts, well, what can I use? I didn't even know what to say at first, but I pulled out Old Faithful. Go ask your parents. It worked. They immediately left. About 20 minutes later, we hear a large group of people coming down the trail. It's the kids and their family, and the kids are whispering and pointing at me, mostly just ringleaders. A female a bit older than me, guessing mom, angrily makes her way over to the spot and lays into me. I don't remember everything, but the general consensus is that I'm ungrateful, and I need to get shot, her words. Kids are still close, so I decide to keep it peege. I also have a little issue with my hearing. If something is too loud, I can't usually make out the sound, like, if you're yelling at me, I'm not going to get every word. I explain I can't hear her when she raises her voice. She starts yelling louder. I'm getting nothing. Friend is mortified. I stare at her until there's a break and say, yeah, I didn't get a word of that. She almost starts to go off again when the husband-boyfriend, older brother, shouts something at her in another language, and she stops. Angry lady, did you tell these boys they couldn't fish? No, I said just the opposite. She's stunned. Why can't they fish then? They're allowed to fish at this lake. They can fish. They're absolutely allowed to fish here. They just can't use my stuff. Why not? Everyone else here is fishing. This lake is owned by the city. Yup, sure is. Blank stares for way too long. You need to teach them to fish. Miss, I can't watch all of them. What if they hurt themselves? Yes, you are. My taxes pay your salary. No, they do not. Yes, they do. I pay taxes and taxes, pay for this lake, and they better not hurt themselves, because if they do, You think I work here? More blank stares. Miss, I work at place I used to work, doing anything I did while I was there. Even more blank stares. I fixed computers I didn't, but it's easier to say that than explain what I really did. Silence. This poor lady looks so embarrassed as it clicks that I'm just a person fishing on their day off. But I don't even get an apology. No recognition that she was wrong. She just climbs back over to the rest of the family as they quietly speak amongst themselves, walking away in their shame. When they're finally out of sight, my friend and I give each other the what the hell just happened look and break into the most beautiful 45-minute session of uncontrollable laughter I've ever had. I studied social work in school. I found myself doing 3 genograms over the course of my schooling. One for intro to social work, one for sociology of mental health, and then another in my last year. I have some not fun family history and trauma, and so these assignments were never my favorite, but my teachers for the first 2 didn't pressure me to disclose only what I wanted and be vague. One even said I could do a fictional family. LOL. The last one did not. See, one thing we learned was that bringing up a client's trauma outside of a therapeutic environment can be harmful. We were bestiacios, which aren't qualified therapists. During intakes and assessments, we learned to tell clients that they don't have to give more details than they wanted to. There's a whole host of reasons behind this, but I'll spare you all the lecture. I brought this up in class after this teacher assigned an extensive genogram with an accompanying 5-page essay on what we learned about ourselves. A third of the class expressed the same concerns. His reasoning was you might be doing this with your clients and you shouldn't ask them to do anything you wouldn't yourself. Not unless I get a graduate degree and become a therapist or psychologist. The teacher also didn't give us an answer when asked if resources for therapy would be provided if this brought up any student's past trauma that they needed to talk about. Oh, and of course, he added this will only be shared with me and is 100% confidential, unless you choose to share. Literally not any of our concerns, but I don't want to share any of my deeply personal business with this man. The assignment did not bother me as much as the hypocrisy of it all. I said between class assignments and therapy, this will be my 5th one. Could I turn one of those in and be given an alternate assignment? He wouldn't budge. He said I didn't need to disclose anything I didn't want to, but followed it up with, but I expect you to take this assignment seriously. And when I turned in a rough draft with about as much as I was willing to disclose, he said it wasn't detailed enough. All right, it's showtime. I have a lot of family trauma that is not mine to disclose, and I rarely ever disclose it. At least not with anyone who would ever meet the folks involved. My own is embarrassing enough, but definitely not as bad as some. But I put all that shy, down on there and wrote about it. Then the following week, the teacher asked if any students would like to share their genogram, if they're comfortable. My hand shot up. I will spare you the details, but I basically gave the class a content notice to allow anyone to leave who may be triggered, a common thing in social work school, and then I just shared all of it. All of the relationships and why they were fed up and why I hate my dad and my sister resents my mom and all that. Cheery smile on my face the whole time. The teacher uncomfortably thanked me for my bravery. A few students shifted in their seats feeling uneasy. Others smiled. Then my friend volunteered to share. She didn't like the assignment either, but she's not one to argue with teachers. Her presentation trumped mine. The girl had a real messed up family, and by the end she was red in the face and everyone was super uncomfortable. Next person to volunteer to share was this girl who was in foster care. I'm not even sure if her sharing was malicious compliance, but hers was the most uncomfortable to hear. She started to cry at the end. Another student who also grew up in foster care started to tear up. The teacher cut us off after that. Another teacher overheard, and the following week, we had some serious discussions in class. I and the other students who shared were referred to the school's mental health center, Lowell. Another teacher I had a good relationship with checked in with me and I told her what happened. I can't tell for certain what went on, but it created a stink in their department. It's been several years since I graduated, but I heard there is now an alternative assignment for the genogram. So, lesson is don't tell social work students to do something that you tell them to never do to their clients, and you don't get into social work unless you are traumatized. This is another tale from my honeymoon and the entitled people that I was lucky enough to meet there. So, for our honeymoon, we went across a number of European cities by train. The traveling was magical. We did 2 of the legs on sleepers, and enjoyed the traveling as much as the destinations. We have gotten to a routine of sightseeing in the morning, having a lunch somewhere fabulous, going back to our hotel for a little lie down in heat of the afternoon, then out for more sightseeing, evening meal somewhere else fabulous, going for a walk in the evening, having an ice cream, another walk in the evening, having an ice cream, another stroll, then sit in a pavement cafe and have a drink and watch the sunset. Fabulous 2 weeks. Some of the cities that we visited were very touristy, but some we thought might be a little quieter. What we couldn't do was get away from the British entitled people. Story. We were in Prague. It was magical. Prague at this time was a big destination for hen, stag, and bachelor parties, and we were used to large numbers of drunk Brits embarrassing themselves, but we just ignored them and enjoyed where we were. We had just had dinner in a small restaurant at the side of the castle, a stroll around the castle grounds, and an ice cream on the way down. We were intending to sit in the main square with beers and mojitos, watching the astronomical clock and the world go by as sunset fell. Seemed like a pretty good plan. As we came down to the Charles Bridge, there were a number of small bars at the bottom of the hill, all of which were in very old, historically important and beautiful buildings. In fact, this particular road and many of the buildings were used in the film Amadeus. The street is narrow, and many of the buildings have steps up to them. It's so narrow that unlike most of the bars in Prague, there is little or no outside seating. We are nearly at the end of the road, about to go over the Charles Bridge, but the road is blocked by a group of people, one of whom is having an argument with someone from a bar at its entrance. The person having the argument is in a wheelchair, the entitled person. Entitled person, you have to let us in. Bare person, no, I don't. It's discrimination. No, it's not. Friend of the entitled person, it is. You have to let disabled people in. Get a ramp now. No, we don't. Yes, you do. Hubby is in facilities management, and he says to me as an aside, it's not discrimination if they physically can't accommodate them due to the building being historical, and they have the right to refuse service to anyone. Most of the buildings we were surrounded by would fall under listed. Buildings which at this time did not have to provide access, that came in 3 years later, however, as private businesses, they could refuse entry to anyone they wanted. Bare person. The bar is narrow. We are already full and turning people away, and your wheelchair would block access to the other tables and the exit in case of a fire. Entitled person. That's not fair. It's my right. Their friend. It is, you can't refuse us service. Bring tables out here now. Bare person. We don't have a license for outside, and there are 10 of you. By this time, there's quite a crowd gathering. The entitled person looks at crowd and speaks to them. It's not fair. It's discrimination. They have to let us in. Someone in the crowd who is obviously not a Brit and is a native Praguean shouts back, stop being a whiny idiot. They're full. Go someone else. Who said that? It's my right to go in there. At this point, the ever-present police wander up. They were extremely good at quieting down any issues with drunks, mainly the Brits. When we were there, policeman to the bar person, what's the problem? The entitled person tried to answer, and the police just held up their hand to quieten her. We are full. We can't accommodate the wheelchair because of the size of the bar, and we don't have a license for drinking outside. The police officer turning to the entitled person, simple, go elsewhere now. The entitled person and friends mutter, but go wandering off up the hill, which was a mistake because the bars up there were even smaller, and we wander off to go watch the sunset and the clock. About an hour later, as we are indulging in more beers and mojitos along with some French fries and a Greek salad, the bars in the square are full and people are being turned away. Who should appear but the entitled person and her friends again. The friends are looking extremely tired. We can hear that they have been wandering around the small bars and getting turned away for the same reason. They come over to the bar where we are sitting outside. It's completely full. There's a waiter at the entrance to the roped-off seating area, and they're turning people away. Entitled person. I need a ramp to get up. Go get one now. Waiter. We're full. Waiter turns their back to them and ignores them. Friends of the entitled person tell her that they are going back to the hotel to get a drink, as they've been out for 2 hours and not had one drink because she keeps insisting on going into bars where they can't fit her wheelchair, and now they are back at the first bar they wanted to go to. And now they are back at the first bar they wanted to go to. It's full, and it's all her fault. Aftermath. I get it. I used to go out drinking with a friend who was on crutches permanently after a car accident 20 years before I met him. It sucks. Disabled access is important, and we used to check up on it before we got to the venue. If a venue is full, we never took it as discrimination. We just knew to get there earlier. and being a brat about it to the bar staff is never right. It's not their fault. It's never their fault. And yes, we saw the group of friends out again over the next few nights, but they were getting to the more accessible bars a lot earlier so they could get in. I used to live on the bottom floor of a 2-story house in a very popular beach town in North Carolina. I was in my mid-20s. The upstairs was rented out to 4 college-age guys. So a total of 5 people, 5 cars driveway built for 4. So one of us would either be on the grass or in a paid spot if you had bills with your name and address. The city would give you a pass to park in certain paid spaces. So not a big deal, but finding a spot in the middle of summer was hard. The house is maybe 100 yards to the beach. It's a pretty short walk, 5 minutes tops, with beach gear and little ones. I would leave to work at 6:30 a.m. and return around 5 or 6 p.m. By the time I got home, most of the crowds would be gone, so a paid spot was easy for me to get. So I typically leave the driveway for the upstairs guys. One day, I was running late and didn't get out of my house till nearly 8. The other guys had left and the driveways were empty. I'm walking out to my car, and of course the lots are already 90s full or more. As I'm crossing the street, I see a minivan coming up and pulling into my driveway. I didn't recognize it, so I waited to see if I knew them or they knew the upstairs guys. Out steps polo shirt, visor, and bowling shorts dad and overly peppy mom with 3 screaming kids, obviously no one I know. I backtrack up. "Excuse me, do you know the tenants upstairs or have permission to park here?" The entitled mom. "It doesn't matter. No one's parked here, and Billy, Bobby, and Brandy have to get to the beach. There's 5 people living there, myself included, and we need to be able to park." "Oh, so where's your car if you live there?" In that spot, there because I have a pass, and the entitled dad interrupts me. "Don't lie to us. You're here just the same as us and just upset we know how to park for free." I'm not lying, dude. It's 8 a.m. I'm wearing my work uniform. "We don't need to listen to you. We're going to park and you can do whatever you want. My children have to get to the beach. You're ruining our vacation. Just go away." Meanwhile, the kids are climbing on my fence and trees on the street. Me. "Okay, I'll just have you towed and you can deal with it later." The entitled dad gets in my face, practically nose to nose. "Try it and see. This isn't your house. You're just a little jerk. Mind you, I'm 5'11", roughly 190 elbs, and in a fairly good shape." Me. "Okay, have a nice day." So I went to my car and waited till they were pretty much at the beach, and like I said, a very short walk. So I went inside, looked up a tow service on the other side of town. "Hello, yes, I'd like to report a car illegally parked on my property." I give them the address. The guy on the other side of the call. "Sir, that's an hour away." "Yeah, I know I'm not paying. That's their problem." "Okay, be there in about an hour and a half." I called my boss and said, "Not gonna be in today," and explained what happened. He's a pretty easygoing guy. Told me to keep him informed. The tow truck arrives, gets the van removed, and I leave my car in the spot and wait. It's 10:30 a.m. or so by now. Sometime around 2 or 3 p.m., there is a very angry knock at my door. Internal thoughts. This gonna be fun. Imagine the shock when I answered the door, beer in hand, grinning like an idiot. Me. "Can I help you?" Entitled parents.
"You! Where's our van? How did you get here?"
"Oh yeah, here's the card for the company I had to tow your van across town. It's gonna be a fun cab ride." I shut the door in their faces. More angry yelling and knocking. Me. "Yes?" Entitled dad trying to get in my house.
"You better get us our van back. I'm gonna beat you up. I'll have you arrested."
Me. "Get out to my house and call the cops. It's not gonna change anything." I managed to shove him out to the door, get it closed and locked. Now I wait. Next 20 minutes are full of more angry knocking and yelling. Finally, about 4 p.m.-ish, I see some blue lights, and there's a much more polite knock at my door. I grew up on the beach. It's a small number of locals. I know 70s of the locals, police, bartenders, shop owners, residents. I know a lot of people on the island. Me. "Oh, hey, Garrett, how it going?" Garrett. "Yeah, it's good. These people say you sold their van and broke into this house." Nope. They pulled into the driveway as I was leaving for work, pulled an attitude, walked away and said I couldn't do anything. So called Lou on the other side of town. Got their van towed there. I even gave them his card and offered to let them use my phone. Entitled mother. "He's lying. He stole our car. I demand he be arrested." The entitled dad, storming up behind the officer, says, "If you don't arrest him, I'll have you fired. This is ridiculous. Blah, blah." Garrett, "Sir, back up. I'm going to figure this out." The entitled dad now shoved past the officer, saying, "This is nonsense." He was working his way into my house again. Garrett was able to pull him out and managed to get him pressed up against his cop car. "Sir, you are trespassing now." Looking over at me, "Would you like to press charges?" Me, "Can you keep him in your car until they get a cab?" "Yeah, I've got to get statements and everything." So I gave my statement, went inside, grabbed a beer, went out the back door, up the back steps, and around to the second floor porch. And there I sat smiling till a cab came about, or 5:30. So this happened a few years back in my hometown. I think I was around 10 or 11, but for some context, my hometown has a celebration we call Canal Days, and it's to celebrate the founding of our town that was built along a canal. So during this Canal Days in particular, there was a hot dog and burger vendor, and like those you would see in the Liberty Mutual commercials. This was the first year I was allowed to go to the Canal Days by myself, as it was when I got my first phone. I had been going on rides and running around with my friends all morning, so when lunch rolled around, I went and got myself a burger, fries, and a soda. I don't remember the kind. It was a good day, and I was enjoying my meal when I heard that noise that we all know on this sub. I didn't notice it at first until the entitled mother got louder and cleared her throat a second time. I turned around to see a middle-aged white woman in her maybe mid-30s with the average Karen haircut, wearing a sunflower dress and a sun hat. The following interaction went something like this. Me, "Yes, ma'am. Can I help you?" Entitled mother, "Oh my God. Are you eating a burger?" Yes. Why? Would you like to know where I got it? Oh, No. I don't want to know because, unlike you, I'm not a meat eater. Yes, she really referred to me as a meat eater, like it's a bad thing. Okay, well then what do you need? I asked in the nicest tone I could muster. I need you to stop eating that filth. My family is only on a vegetarian diet and aren't murderers like you. It was at this time that her two goblins had walked up from their baseball games that were going on. Entitled Kid 1, "Mom, what's this kid eating?" Entitled mother, "Oh, it's just a burger, sweetie." It's disgusting though, isn't it? Yes, it is. Unlike him, we eat healthy and aren't animal killers. It was at this time that I'd realized that her second son had walked up behind me and was looking at my food. Me,
"Hey, what are you doing with my food?"
Entitled Kid 2, "Oh, nothing, just getting rid of this filth." You can't do that. I paid for it and it's mine. You don't get to choose what happens to it. Whatever. I turned back to the entitled mother when I had a perfect idea. I shoved the burger into my mouth and took a big bite and made the biggest deal about how good it tasted. To the mother's disapproval. It was at this point that the entitled mother went red and proceeded to slap the burger out of my mouth. When I retaliated and yelled at her, she just laughed, and when I cussed at her, I called her a witch because of how she was acting. Her little entitled son tried to fight me and was yelling and screaming at me for disrespecting his mother. I was so happy I knew how to wrestle and I was able to get him off me, but at the cost of him getting hurt. After all of this happened, a police officer came over to hear the entitled kid screaming about his broken teeth. This officer asked what happened, and Karen told him a twisted story of how she was just talking to me about my eating habits, and that type of nonsense. After she was done, the officer came over to me and asked my side of the story. And something I forgot to mention, I was recording my surroundings to send it to a friend that moved away. He asked for a recording of his favorite hometown event. Anyway, the convo with the officer went like this. Police officer, "Son, this woman told me that you assaulted her and her boys after she tried to talk to you about what you were eating. Is that what happened?" Me, "No, what actually happened was I was minding my own business and eating a burger when she berated me for eating meat, and when I took another bite to keep eating, she slapped it out of my hand." As for her son, he tried to attack me when I cussed at his mother. Am I gonna be in any trouble? No, son, it seems that you were just defending yourself, but I need to ask some witnesses what had happened. Okay, well, can I go grab my phone to text my mom? Sure, that's fine. As soon as I picked up my phone and noticed that it was still recording, I ran like the flash over to the cop and told him I have a recording of the incident. As soon as the entitled mother heard this, she went white as a ghost. I handed my phone to the cop. Never do this, by the way, it's a dumb idea, and showed him the recording. He watched it, found the real truth, put Karen in handcuffs, and that was that, but I at least got to have the rest of the day to have fun and enjoy the last of my food that was still there.